Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. You ever hear music in the woods when there's no one around? Not birds, not wind in the trees, I mean music. A tune, soft and sad, floating out of nowhere like it's caught in the air. Some folks say it's just the breeze playing tricks. But I know better. My name's Walt Dempsey. Back in the spring of '59, I was a park ranger in the Adirondacks, worked the trails behind Okara Falls, a quiet place most of the year, loud as hell during snowmelt. River runs high and angry then, chewing at the banks like it's trying to climb out. That week I was sent up alone. The higher-ups wanted me to check the water levels before the spring hikers rolled in. Real peaceful job, normally. Take a few notes, maybe fix a rope bridge if it's loose, report back. But that trip never left me. I wasn't new to being alone. Hell, I liked it that way. After Korea, silence felt like a gift, but it had its price. Nightmares. Ringing in my ears that never stopped, and memories that showed up without knocking. I'd hum to myself to keep my mind busy. Sometimes I'd play my harmonica too. Just a little silver thing my buddy Frank gave me before he died. I'd sit by the fire at night, play his favorite tune, and feel like maybe he was still around, listening. Anyway, I set out early. That morning with my gear. Boots, map, rope, knife, harmonica in my coat pocket. Snow still clung to the edges of the trail, and the ground sucked at my steps like wet sponge. Trees were just starting to wake up. Buds on the branches, birds chirping like they'd missed the world. The air was fresh, cold, real sharp in the lungs. I walked for hours, stopping here and there to note down how much of the trail was passable. The river was running strong, foaming white over rocks. Waterfalls pounded like war drums off the cliffs. Then something caught my eye. A fish. Floating belly up in a still pool beside the trail. Then another and another. Now I've seen fish die, seen bears swipe at them, storms shock them, even water pollution. But these ones had no wounds, no bite marks, no slime. Their eyes looked wrong, empty, like something had scooped the soul out. I crouched down, poked one with a stick. Cold, real cold, too cold. I took a breath and looked around. Nothing moved. No squirrels, no birdsong, just the falls roaring in the distance. I shook. Derulf. Figured maybe something upstream had poisoned the water. Figured I'd check it later, but a part of me, a small, quiet part of me already knew. This wasn't normal, not by a long shot. I kept walking, didn't want to sit too long with those dead fish staring up at me. The trail behind Okara Falls isn't marked on most maps. Locals know it, sure. But tourists never go that far in. It's narrow, mostly dirt and roots hugging the side of a cliff. On one side, thick trees. On the other, the river. Loud, fast, and full. I was about 2 miles in when I started feeling it. You know that weird feeling when you walk into a room and forget why you came? Like the air's heavy, and your skin just knows something's not, right? That's how it felt, only worse. The first thing I noticed was the cold, and not just spring chill cold. The deeper I got, the more it bit through my coat. My breath started showing again like it was winter all over. I rubbed my hands together, blew into my gloves. Then I noticed the trees. At first I thought it was fire damage. The bark was black, cracked in places, but it wasn't burned. No ash, no smoke smell, just black like the color had been sucked out. Some trunks even had claw marks, long, deep ones that didn't match bear or cat. I told myself it might have been lightning. Or frostbite, but deep down I knew better. Something else had passed through here. I kept going, I don't know why. Some mix of duty and dumb curiosity, I guess. You don't spend years in war and then scare easy. But I was starting to feel watched. Paused under a tall pine and took a long look around. No movement, no birds, no chipmunks, not even bugs. Just that wind, and the sound of the falls, louder now, closer. I figured I was about 30 minutes from the rope bridge that crosses behind Okara Falls. There's a small ridge there. Water crashes in front of it like a curtain. I was supposed to check the bridge for damage. As I walked, something strange happened. I hummed a little, an old tune I always do when I feel anxious. But the sound came back to me, twisted, like it bounced off the cliffs wrong. Echoed back slower, deeper. It made me stop dead in my tracks. I hummed again. This time, nothing came back. Just silence. I checked over my shoulder. Still nothing. No sign of animals, hikers, not even tracks in the wet mud, but mine. I was completely alone. But it didn't feel like it. My heart was picking up now. Not racing, but thudding slow and heavy like it knew something my brain didn't. I reached into my coat, touched my harmonica. That little bit of metal always calmed me down. I didn't play it. Not yet. Just held it. Like a hand on your shoulder. When you're trying not to lose it. The trees opened up ahead, and I could see the start of the rope bridge. Water mist hung thick in the air. The pounding sound of the falls was so strong now I had to squint. And that's when I saw it. Not clearly. Just a shadow. Something moved behind the falls. And the air? It got even colder. I stood still for a long minute. The mist rolled out from the waterfall like breath from a giant mouth. It soaked into my coat and hat, clung to my skin. The bridge in front of me swayed gently even though there was no wind. I kept staring at the falls. I saw the shadow again, just for a second. It moved behind the water like something pacing back and forth. Not big, not loud, just wrong. You ever see something out the corner of your eye? Then when you look straight at it, it's gone. That's what it felt like. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I'd been walking for hours. Hadn't eaten since sunrise, maybe I was tired. That's all. Waterfall mist does funny things to your eyes. It plays games. Still, I pulled my harmonica out and gave it one quiet note. High and soft. Just to hear. Something human. The sound echoed back almost right, but not quite. It came back, lower, like someone else played the same note, slower, with heavier breath. I shivered, swallowed hard. I crossed the rope bridge slow, testing each step. The wood was soaked, and the ropes creaked like old bones. Below me the river roared. The spray hit my face like cold needles. I tried not to look down. Halfway across I stopped. There was something behind the falls. Not just a shadow now, a shape. Tall, thin, almost human, but not quite. I couldn't make out a face, but I could feel it watching me. I didn't know how, but I knew it was waiting. I don't know what pushed me forward. Maybe I didn't want to turn my back to it. Maybe it was just habit, like in the war. You move or you die. I made it across and climbed onto the rocky ledge behind the waterfall. The air back there was freezing. My fingers felt stiff. My breath came out in thick clouds. The noise of the falls was deafening now, but still. I heard something else. A sound beneath the water, like whispers. Soft, constant, coming from the dark space behind the fall. I raised my flashlight. There was a narrow path leading into the rock wall, like a hidden cave, just a few feet wide, jagged edges. It looked like something had clawed it out over time. The black bark, the silence, the cold. It all made sense now. This was where it lived. I should have turned back right then. But I didn't. I stepped inside. The cave behind the waterfall was colder than anything I'd ever felt in my life. And I've been in Korean winters, half buried in snow, shaking so bad I thought my teeth would break. But this wasn't just cold. It felt like it was crawling under my skin. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside. The walls were damp and narrow. Water dripped from the rocks. It smelled wrong, like old meat and wet leaves. My boots crunched on something. I looked down. Bones. Animal bones. Mostly small ones, rabbits, birds, but then I saw a boot. Just one. Torn. Covered in moss. My chest tightened. I took a slow breath and moved forward. I don't know how far I went. Maybe 10 steps, maybe more. Time felt weird in there, like I was sinking into something that didn't want me to leave. Then, I saw it. At first, I thought it was hanging from the ceiling. It had long arms, too long, almost spider-like. Its body looked starved, like skin pulled over sticks. No eyes I could see, just a face stretched tight, with a mouth that hung open far too wide. It didn't move. Not yet. It just clung to the rock above me, watching, or feeling, or smelling. I don't know. I froze, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. My flashlight dimmed, then went out. Dark. Total dark. I could hear it now. Not just breathing, not just moving. It was humming, low and slow. And it sounded like me. My song, the one I always played, Frank's tune. I backed up one step. My boot slid a little on the wet stone. The creature twitched. Then it started crawling down the wall, smooth and slow, like it had all the time in the world. Its limbs stretched in ways no body should. Every move was silent, careful, like it was used to dragging itself through narrow places. I pulled out my harmonica, hands shaking. I didn't blow into it. Not yet. But I held it tight like a rope in a storm. The Wendigo, because that's what it had to be, stopped just a few feet from me. I could feel it now. It wasn't just cold. It was pulling something from me. Like the warmth in my chest. Like memories. I started forgetting things. Little things. What day it was. Why I came here. My own name. That's when I knew I had seconds. If I didn't do something now, I wouldn't be walking back out of that cave. I turned and ran. Fast as I could. Didn't care if I slipped, didn't care if it followed. I just ran toward the sound of the waterfall. And behind me, I heard it coming. Not fast, not loud, but steady. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. I burst out of the cave into the freezing mist behind the waterfall. The air hit me like a slap, wet and sharp, but it felt better than what I left behind. My boots hit the rocks hard, slipping a little, but I kept moving toward the rope bridge. Behind me, I heard it. The Wendigo. It wasn't screaming or growling. Just that slow, awful humming, like it was still using my song. And it was closer now. I got to the bridge and stepped onto the first plank. It creaked under me. My hands grabbed the wet ropes, my chest was tight, every breath burned. Halfway across, I stopped. My foot was stuck. I looked down. My boot had slipped between two planks, wedged tight. I pulled once. No luck. Pulled again. Still stuck. And that's when I saw it step onto the bridge. It didn't walk right. Its body folded in strange ways, like its bones weren't put together like ours. Its face, if you could even call it that, stretched open wider now, like it was smiling without lips. It moved slow, one hand gripping the rope, the other dragging behind. I panicked. I yanked at my foot. Still stuck. So I reached into my coat and pulled out the harmonica. One last time, I raised it to my lips, played Frank's tune, simple, soft. The notes floated into the mist, and the creature stopped. Its head jerked back like something had hit it. Then it let out this awful sound, like a scream made of wind and cracking wood. It shook, arms twitching like the song was burning it from the inside. I kept playing, louder now. My fingers were frozen. My lungs ached. But I didn't stop. It shrieked again, and in that moment, I made a choice. I reached down, cut the rope nearest my foot with my belt knife. The bridge snapped. Everything dropped. Felt weightless for half a second. Then the cold water swallowed me whole. The last thing I heard wasn't the creature. It was the echo of my harmonica, fading into the roar of the falls. They never found my body. A search team came up a week later, when I didn't report back. They followed my tracks to the bridge. What was left of it? Just ropes hanging like broken strings swaying in the wind. The cave behind the waterfall. They didn't go that far. Too dangerous, they said. Water was too high. Trail too slippery. No sign of an attack, no blood. No body. Just my old harmonica. It was lying on the rocks by the edge of the river. still dry somehow, like it had been placed there. A young ranger named Miller found it, said he picked it up and it felt warm, like someone had just been holding. He turned it over and saw a name scratched faintly into the side. Frank. They listed me as drowned. A quiet accident. Happens sometimes. But the hikers that came weeks later, they started talking. One couple swore they heard music in the trees. Near Okara Falls. A soft tune. No words. Just a slow, sad melody. Another man said he saw something standing in the mist behind the water. Something tall, with long arms, just watching. And sometimes at night, if you camp too close to the river, you might hear it too. A harmonica. Playing, gently in the dark, not loud enough to scare you, just enough to remind you. Some things never leave the forest. I've walked these woods for over 30 years. But that morning, the trees didn't feel the same. The air was heavy, like something was waiting to speak. The kind of quiet that makes you stop and listen, not because you hear something, but because you don't. And around Mount Washington, silence is never good. My name's Caleb Fry, 60 years old, oldest active ranger in the White Mountains. I've seen rock slides, bear attacks, even pulled a guy out of a frozen lake once, but nothing ever made my skin crawl like what happened in the fall of '93. It started when a trail crew went missing. 5 young guys, tough, smart, mountain kids. They were working near the ravine below Tuckerman Trail when a rock slide hit. The report said it was sudden, no warning. By the time help arrived, the trail was buried under broken granite. Nobody found the bodies. Not one. I remember standing at the edge of the collapse that day. The sky was gray, cold wind blowing off the cliffs, yellow helmets, tool bags, lunch, tins all scattered like the crew had just stepped away for a moment. But no footprints, no blood, nothing, just broken rock, and this strange buzzing in my ears that wouldn't go away. I bent down to pick up one of the helmets. The plastic was warped, like it had been near fire, but there hadn't been any fire, just a slide. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my old ranger cabin, the wood stove crackling, holding Sarah's scarf in my hand. She died 5 years back. Cancer. Some nights I still talk to her, like she's just out of the room. Sounds crazy, I know. But when you spend your life in the forest, you learn to hear things that don't speak out loud. I tied her scarf to my belt and told myself I'd take one last look the next morning. Something wasn't right up there. I could feel it in my bones. The next day, the weather dropped. Cold, dry air. Sky clear, but somehow dim. I packed light, just rope, flashlight, my radio, and a map. I hiked back up to the gorge alone. The rocks felt wrong under my boots, loose but not in the usual way, like they didn't want me there. Then I saw it. On one of the larger boulders, split clean down the middle, there was a symbol carved into the flat surface, a spiral, an eye in the middle, carved deep, not scratched. Sharp lines like it was done with a blade, or claws. I stared at it for a while. I've seen trail marks, graffiti, even old native signs carved in tree bark, but this was different. It felt old, angry. I reached out and touched it. The stone was warm. I pulled my hand back. That's when I heard something behind me, like a rock shifting. I spun around, heart thudding. Nothing, just wind, or so I told myself. I radioed the station. No answer. Figured I'd climb down a bit into the gorge, check for signs of bodies or another slide path. I moved slow, testing every step. The granite was cracked in strange patterns like something had pushed up from underneath. I followed the cracks, down past a thicket of fir trees. I found gear wedged between the rocks, ropes, a hammer, even someone's boot. No blood, no drag marks. It's like they just melted into the ground and still no bodies. I took a breath and looked around. That buzzing in my ears returned, louder, steady now, like a hum, but deeper, almost like it was inside my chest. That's when I noticed something even stranger. A line of smaller stones had been laid out nearby, neatly like someone or something had placed them. And right at the end, another spiral eye. This one carved into a fallen tree trunk, blackened around the edges like it had been burned. I pulled out my notebook and sketched it. Then the ground beneath me trembled. Not an earthquake. I've felt those. This was more like something shifting, moving. I backed away, fast. My heart was racing now. I gripped Sarah's scarf, still tied to my belt, and whispered, "What the hell is this?" Of course, she didn't answer. But something else did. From somewhere deep below, I heard a sound, just for a second. Low, like the rumble of thunder. But it spoke. Not in words I could understand, but it had a rhythm, a vibration that made my jaw ache and my knees weak. I turned and climbed back out of the gorge. Didn't stop until I reached the cabin. That night, I didn't light the fire. I sat in the dark, holding the scarf, staring at the drawing of the spiral in my notebook. Something took those boys. Not a bear, not a slide, not anything I'd ever seen before. And if it's still down there, I need to find it. I couldn't sleep again. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound from the gorge. The deep humming growl that made my bones feel loose. Like something was calling from under the mountain. At first light, I packed a bag, just the basics. Rope, flashlight, a flare, radio, my notebook, and Sarah's scarf still tied to my belt like always. I didn't tell the station. I figured if I was wrong, I'd come back by nightfall. If I was right, well, someone had to see it. The path down to the gorge felt colder than it should have. The sun was out, but the ground held this strange chill. Like the mountain itself was holding its breath. I climbed back down toward the broken rocks, careful with every step. I followed the same cracks I saw the day before, moving slower this time, studying the ground. Then I saw it, one of the deeper fissures I'd missed before. It wasn't natural. Not the way it opened. It was too smooth, too long, like something heavy had pushed up and split the stone apart like soft bread. I knelt down, shining my flashlight inside. It went deep, much deeper than I expected. I tossed in a pebble. No sound, stomach twisted. I checked my rope, tied it to a strong root, and slowly lowered myself in. The walls were damp and narrow at first, smelled like wet rock and old fire. I had to squeeze through sideways for a while, but then it opened up into a tunnel, a natural one, but barely. The floor was uneven and warm in places. I swear it felt like the stone pulsed once or twice under my boots, like a faint heartbeat. I told myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. About 15 feet in, the tunnel curved and dropped a little. That's where I found the first thing that made my skin crawl. It was a rope, one of the trail crew's climbing ropes wrapped around a broken stone spike, still tied in a loop like someone had used it to lower themselves. But it was fused into the rock. Not stuck, melted into it. I touched it with my glove. The rope was warm, stiff like metal. I stepped back. That's when I noticed the second thing, a faint sound, not the growl from before. This was softer, like a far-off engine, or a voice, too deep to hear properly. It came from deeper in the tunnel, a slow, steady hum that vibrated in my teeth. I kept going. The deeper I walked, the more I found. Gear, pieces of tools, even a smashed radio. Each one somehow melted into the walls, or floor, no blood, no signs of struggle. It was like the mountain had swallowed them. After another bend, I reached a wide chamber. My flashlight barely lit the whole thing. The walls glowed faint orange in spots, like veins of magma ran just behind them. I took a step forward and stopped. There were markings on the walls, carvings, dozens of them. Some looked like people, arms raised. Others showed creatures with sharp limbs, tall and bent, like shadows with fire inside. All around them were more spiral eyes, some with lines spreading out like sun rays, others with cracks through them. I stood there, breathing slow. There were no names, no dates, just images. Old ones burned deep into the rock. And then I saw what I'd feared most. The crew. They were there, half buried in the stone. Faces tilted back, eyes open, mouths wide in frozen screams. But they weren't bloody or torn. It looked like the rock had grown around them, One guy had his hand halfway through the stone wall, as if he was trying to crawl out and got stuck mid-movement. I dropped my flashlight. It clattered on the floor but didn't break. I backed up, breathing fast now, sweat running down my neck even though the air was cold. And then the humming got louder. The floor trembled just slightly. A new crack formed at the far wall, stretching upward like a thin black scar. It opened slowly, stone grinding against stone. I stared. Something was behind it. I didn't see its face. Not yet. But I saw the glow. Red and orange, like fire inside flesh. Smoke rolled out, thick and sour, stinging my nose and eyes. The sound wasn't like anything I've ever heard. It was alive but wrong. It didn't growl, it didn't roar. It vibrated. A voice, if you could call it that, came through the smoke. Not words, just pressure. Like the air itself was shaking. I felt it in my chest, in my bones. And I knew then. It wasn't just hiding under the mountain. It was the mountain. I turned and ran. Didn't care how deep I was. Didn't care about the crew. I knew I couldn't help them. I had to get out. As I climbed back through the tunnel, I felt the walls warm behind me. Heard a low rumble following. But I didn't look back. When I burst out into the open air, the cold hit me hard. I didn't stop running until I reached the tree line. I looked back once. Smoke rose from the gorge. And far below, I swear I heard it whisper something. Not in a language I knew, but I understood it just fine. It was saying, "You saw me. Now you belong." I didn't go back to the station that night. I didn't radio anyone either. What would I even say? That I'd found melted ropes, carved symbols, and a fire-breathing thing crawling under the mountain? They'd lock me up. So I stayed in my cabin, didn't light the fire, didn't eat. Just sat there with Sarah's scarf in my lap, staring at the sketch I'd made. The spiral eye with cracks running through it. I kept hearing that hum in my ears. Not loud anymore, but steady. Like a warning that wouldn't stop. The next morning I made a decision. I had to go back, not because I was brave. I wasn't. I was scared. My hands shook every time I thought about that crack in the wall, about the way those crewmen looked, stuck in stone like flies in amber. But this thing, whatever it wasn't just sleeping down there. It was waking. I packed again, but this time I added something else. Blasting charges. We kept them in storage at the ranger station for controlled avalanches. I knew how to use them. We were trained. Never thought I'd use them for something like this, though. I hiked back up. No wind, no birds. Even the squirrels were gone. I followed the same path down to the fissure, set my rope, and went in. The tunnel felt warmer now. Not hot, just in breathing. And the deeper I went, the more the walls seemed to glow. Not bright. Just faint little pulses under the rock like distant lightning. When I reached the chamber again, I stopped dead in my tracks. The bodies were still there, still frozen in the stone. But the walls had changed. More carvings, fresh ones. I know that sounds crazy, but I swear they weren't there before. The spiral symbols were everywhere now, some of them glowing faintly like embers. And the crack in the far wall, wider, still breathing smoke. I placed the charges, 3 of them, 1 near the chamber roof, 2 by the fault line. I worked fast, quiet. Didn't want to wake it, but I was already too late. A rumble rolled through the ground, not sharp like an earthquake, but deep and slow, like a bear growling right under your feet. Then came the heat. The crack split wider. Smoke hissed out, and then it came through. I saw it for the first time. It was tall, taller than a moose. Its skin wasn't skin. It was stone, but alive, covered in glowing cracks, like the Earth's crust during a volcano. Lava poured slowly between the plates, dripping onto the ground. Its face had no eyes, just a wide slit that steamed with heat, and deep inside something pulsed with red light. When it stepped forward, the rock under it melted slightly. Its breath came out in bursts of smoke and ash, and each time it exhaled I felt it in my chest. And then it spoke, not in words. It vibrated. My teeth hurt. My nose bled. My legs felt like jelly. It wasn't trying to talk, it was trying to shake me apart. I fell to my knees. I grabbed Sarah's scarf, squeezed it so hard my knuckles turned white. And then I remembered something dumb. She used to hum to calm me down. Just 3 notes. Over and over. So I hummed it. There in that hot, shaking tunnel. I hummed my dead wife's song while this thing stared at me with its mouth full of fire. It stopped. Just for a moment. I used that moment. Ran to the far side, hit the timer on the charges. 3 minutes, and started climbing back up. But the thing didn't stay frozen long. I heard it coming after me, slow, dragging limbs, scraping rock. The tunnel shook. The humming got louder. I reached the rope tied fast to the root above and climbed with everything I had left. When I pulled myself out, I didn't even stop to breathe. I ran 10 feet, turned around, and dropped behind a rock. Then, the blast hit. The mountain shook. A roar came up from below, loud enough to make the sky feel like it cracked. Dust and smoke poured out of the fissure. Bits of stone rained down like hail. The earth trembled under me for a good 30 seconds. Then silence. Real silence. Not a hum. Not a breeze. Not even the sound of trees swaying. Just stillness. I didn't go back to the chamber. I couldn't. I just sat there, coughing, dirt on my face, hands shaking, and I cried. Not because I was hurt, but because I knew something. That thing wasn't dead. Just buried. Like before. I spent the night on the cold forest floor. Didn't even make it back to my cabin. Just sat there, back against a tree, staring at the crack in the ground where the thing had come from. I could still feel the heat rising, slow and steady, like the earth was breathing through a wound. I wanted to believe it was over, that the blast had worked, that the mountain would hold it down again. But deep in my gut, I knew better. That hum. It was still there, quiet now but steady, like it had gone to sleep. Not dead, just resting. And it would wake up again, sooner or later. I hiked back to my cabin in the early morning. My legs felt like rubber. My lungs ached. I hadn't eaten in over a day, but I wasn't hungry. I just felt hollow. At the station, I wrote a short report. Said the crew was lost in the slide. Said recovery was too dangerous. Nothing about the carvings. Nothing about the fire or the thing below. They'd never believe me anyway. I sat at my desk, stared at Sarah's picture, and thought about what to do. I could leave, walk away, let someone else handle it, or pretend it never happened. But that spiral was still in my notebook, and every time I looked at it, my hands started to shake. I knew what I had to do. I took out the rest of the blasting charges. If I could, find the heart of the thing, whatever part of it was really alive, I could bury it for good. Seal the tunnels, crush it. Even if it meant I didn't make it out, I wasn't scared anymore. I was tired. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to see Sarah again. I recorded a tape, old cassette recorder from the gear shed. Pressed the red button and just talked. Hey, this is Caleb. If you're hearing this, I probably didn't make it back. That's okay. I've had a good run. I paused. I saw something. Something that doesn't belong in this world. It's real, it's old, and it's angry. It took those boys, and it's going to take more if I don't stop it. Another pause. And Sarah, if you're out there somewhere, I'm coming soon. I ended the tape, packed my gear, tied Sarah's scarf tight around my belt, and made my way up the mountain one last time. The sky was gray again, clouds heavy and still. The wind didn't move the trees. Even the birds were quiet. I reached the fissure. Smoke still rose from it, faint but steady. I tied off my rope, took one long breath, and went back in. The tunnel had changed. Walls were darker now. Carvings were deeper, almost glowing red in the dark. The chamber was cracked wide open, rubble everywhere, but the heart of it, the center pit, was still whole. And that's where I saw it. The devil. It wasn't standing this time. It was curled into the rock like a snake sleeping in a hot coil. Its skin was cracked and glowing. Smoke hissed from its back in slow bursts. It didn't move, but it was awake, watching. I moved quietly, placing the charges one by one around the chamber. Set them deeper this time, near the ceiling and floor where the pressure would hit hardest. I had just one left, and I knew where to put it, right next to the creature's body. I walked toward it, each step slow and careful. It didn't attack. It just watched. I could feel its breath in my bones again. That hum was back, stronger now, buzzing through the stone like a song no one should ever hear. I knelt beside it, placed the last charge, set the timer for 2 minutes, stood up, and for a moment, I swear, I saw something behind the fire in its body. Not hate, not rage, but hunger. A deep, bottomless hunger that had waited centuries. I turned to leave, took 3 steps, and the tunnel started to close. Stone shifted. The ceiling groaned. The air filled. With heat and smoke, the devil had felt the charge, knew what I was doing. I ran, made it halfway before the tunnel gave way. Rocks rained down. Fire flashed. I slipped, fell hard. Couldn't move my leg. Didn't matter. I crawled. Clutching Sarah's scarf, I dragged myself back toward the rope. But I knew I wasn't going to reach it in time. So I stopped, rolled onto my back, looked up at the cracked ceiling and waited. "See you soon, Sarah," I whispered. Then everything turned to light. A week passed. Search teams combed the mountain after the ranger station reported Caleb Fry missing. They found the rope tied to the root above the fissure, still firm, still waiting. But no sign of him. The tunnel had collapsed completely. Smoke still rose from the cracks. Trees nearby were scorched. Leaves singed black even though there'd been no fire reported. The ground was warm to the touch. Some said it was volcanic activity, but Mount Washington was not a volcano. The trail crew was never recovered. Their names were carved into a wooden post near the ranger cabin, just above the fire pit where Caleb used to sit. Someone added his name too. Ranger Caleb Fry, lost in the line of duty. The station moved on slowly. Another ranger was assigned to the cabin. The charges in the area were checked, the files closed. No one mentioned the drawings in Caleb's notebook. No one talked about the spiral symbol, not until it came back. 14 miles from the gorge, a family hiking near Glen Boulder Trail found something strange. A trail sign had been burned, not by lightning or campfire. It wasn't even broken, just blackened like it had been pressed against hot iron. In the center of the sign, clear as day, was the spiral eye, burned deep into the wood. Clean lines, perfect circle, fresh. The hiker dad took a photo, thought it was some kind of prank. His phone died 5 minutes later. Wouldn't turn back on. Later that evening, a radio at the ranger station crackled to life. An old one that hadn't been used in years, just static at first. Then a low hum came through, deep, slow, shaking the speaker until it buzzed and cracked. Then, silence. Some said it was just interference. But one of the younger rangers, Jake, who had cleaned out Caleb's cabin, found something else, a page left behind, tucked under the floorboard. It had the spiral drawn on it over and over, darker each time. At the bottom of the page, written in Caleb's rough handwriting, were 4 words. "It's still beneath us." Jake didn't sleep that night. He went back to the cabin the next day and sat at the same spot Caleb used to sit. The trees were quiet again, but this time, they felt like they were listening. I've worked night shifts for years, but that night the forest didn't feel like a forest. It felt like something was watching us, something that didn't belong. They sent me out because I was the only one who said yes. 2 teenagers had gone missing from a campsite deep in Shawnee National Forest. It was a hot and sticky summer night in 1966. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't moved in hours. Crickets hummed lazily, and fireflies danced over the treetops. But even that felt off, too quiet, too careful. I drove in with Deputy Miller just after sunset. He was young, nervous, still new to the job. I could tell he wasn't used to the woods. He kept wiping sweat off his neck and glancing at the trees like they were going to reach out and grab him. "I've got a bad feeling about this," he said, half joking. I didn't answer. I just stared ahead at the dirt trail, gripping the wheel. The last people to camp here had vanished without a trace. Their fire was still warm when hikers found the empty site that morning. I'm Ranger Geneva Rowe. I've worked these forests for nearly a decade, mostly alone. Before this, I was an ER nurse. I've seen bad things, but nothing I saw in the hospital prepared me for what I would face that night. In my backpack, I always keep a baseball. It belonged to my son. He was 10 when a hit and run took him from me. Driver never stopped, never got caught. Since then, I don't sleep much. The forest helps me think, or maybe helps me forget. The sun dipped lower behind the trees as Miller and I hiked to the clearing. Our boots crunched on dry leaves. The trees above blocked out most of the light, and shadows crept in quickly. The campsite was just ahead. Torn tents, a circle of stones where the fire had burned, and one crushed lantern. The kind of scene that should have been loud and messy with people, but it was dead still. We both stopped walking. The silence was so deep, I could hear Miller breathing behind me. No wind, no crickets now, no birds. I took a step forward, and that's when I saw it. Blood. A long streak of it, leading from the edge of the fire pit to the tree line. Not just a drop or two. A full drag mark, like someone had been pulled. I followed it with my eyes, and then spotted the sleeping bag. Torn, soaked in dark, dried blood. Miller swore under his breath. That's not normal. I knelt beside it, my heart starting to beat faster. The fabric was shredded like it had been clawed open. Then I saw the rocks nearby, deep scratches in them, 3 long lines like someone had taken a massive blade and raked it across the surface. But these weren't made with a knife. They were too wide, too wild. Miller bent down next to me. "Bear," he whispered. I shook my head. "Bears don't do this. They don't play." And just then, we heard it. A branch snapped behind us. We both stood up fast and turned. Nothing there. The air suddenly smelled different. Metallic. Like blood. Like copper coins pressed against your tongue. I touched my chest, trying to slow my breathing. My eyes scanned the trees. Still nothing. But something was wrong. Deeply wrong. A loud rustle came from our right, and a deer burst out from the bushes. It ran like it was on fire, charging past us so close I could see its eyes. Wide, wild, terrified. Its belly was torn open. I could see inside it, and somehow... It was still running. Miller stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. "Jesus, what the hell?" We didn't speak for a few seconds. Just stood there, listening to our own breath and the silence closing in around us again. Finally, I said, "We don't turn back, not yet." He looked at me like I was crazy. "Geneva, something's out here." "I know," I said quietly. "But whatever it is, it's been here before." Because I remembered something, an old ranger tale. A deep part of the forest, a pit dug long ago, something about traps, warnings. I never believed in stories before, but now I wasn't so sure. We followed the blood. It wasn't just one spot or one streak, it was everywhere. Smears on tree bark, drops in the grass, thick dark stains on the rocks. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been quick. Miller walked behind me, quiet now. His flashlight shook in his hand. I didn't blame him. Mine wasn't much steadier. The trail of blood led us past the edge of the campsite and deeper into the woods. The trees started to crowd closer together, thicker, darker. It felt like walking into a tunnel, even though the sky was still a dark shade of blue above us. Something about the air had changed too. It was heavier, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Miller spoke in a low voice. "You ever seen anything like this before?" "No," I answered, "and I've seen a lot." He didn't say anything after that. We kept going, following the trail over roots and stones. Every so often I stopped to mark our way with chalk on the trees. I didn't want to get lost in here, especially not tonight. Then we found the cliff. It wasn't a big one, maybe 15 feet tall, but steep and jagged, with a wall of gray rock covered in moss. The blood trail led right up to it, then vanished. Looked around. The ground was dry, no signs of dragging after that. And then I saw the marks, claw marks again. Deep, long, carved into the stone like it was nothing. 3 at first, then 5, then another set higher up. Geneva, Miller whispered, stepping beside me. Those aren't from any animal I know. Me neither, I said. And I've lived in these woods longer than most folks have lived, in this state. We both stood there, staring up at the rock face. Something had climbed it, or leapt, or something else. I didn't want to guess. Behind us, the forest was still quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. And then, like a switch, had been flipped. Everything went silent. No bugs, no birds, not even leaves rustling, just nothing. I felt it in my chest first. A tightness. Like something was pressing down on me. That's when the smell came back. That same copper scent. Stronger this time. Mixed with something else now. Wet fur. Rot. I pulled a bandana from my pocket and held it over my mouth, pretending I was just wiping sweat. I didn't want Miller to see how shaken I was. He took a few slow steps toward the base of the cliff, shining his light into the small cave just to the side. That's when the crying started. It was soft at first. A whimper, like a little kid lost. The woods, I froze. Did you hear that? Miller asked. Yeah. He turned toward the sound, light sweeping across the trees. The voice came again. Mommy, my blood went cold. I knew that voice. It sounded just like my son. I hadn't heard that word in years. Not like that. It didn't make sense. Couldn't be real. I knew it wasn't. But hearing it hit something deep inside me. I stepped back, my throat dry. It's not real, I whispered. What? Miller turned to me. Don't follow it, whatever that is. It's not a kid. But Miller didn't listen. He started walking toward the sound. Stop, I said, louder this time. That's not a child. He looked back at me, unsure. What if it is? The voice came again, closer now. Mommy, help me. That time it was wrong. The pitch was off, too slow, like someone trying to sound like a child, but not quite. Getting it right, Miller stopped. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, you're right. We both turned back toward the cliff, and that's when we saw them, footprints, huge ones, in the mud just past the rock wall, too long, too wide, with claws, at the tips. But here's the thing. They weren't walking prints, they were standing upright. I knelt beside them, held my hand next to one. Each foot was nearly twice the length of mine. Something had been here, and it had stood up like a man. I looked up at Miller. His face was pale, mouth slightly open. Neither of us said anything. The wind picked up just then, a slow, cool breeze brushing the trees. It should have felt nice, but it didn't. It felt like something was moving, not past us, but around us. Something was following us. We didn't see it, not yet, but we could feel it. Like the trees were watching, like the ground itself knew we didn't belong. Miller and I stood frozen for a while, staring at those footprints. I counted 3 full ones and a 4th only halfway stamped in the mud. They led around the rock face and into the darker part of the forest, the part people never hiked, the part that even animals seemed to avoid. I didn't want to go that way, but I also knew turning back wasn't safer. Let's move, I said softly, eyes scanning the woods. Miller didn't argue. He just nodded and followed. We kept walking, stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The air felt colder now, even though it was still summer. Every now and then, the wind would blow just enough to move the leaves, but not enough to cover the sounds around us. Because that's when the noises started again. Not voices this time, just soft sounds, scratching, tapping, like nails against wood. Sometimes on the trees, sometimes closer, like it was right behind us. Miller kept glancing over his shoulder. I think it's circling us. I know, I whispered, but I didn't stop walking. We came across an old hunting shelter, wooden walls falling apart, roof half caved in, covered in vines and moss. I remembered seeing it on a map once, built by rangers back in the 40s, then abandoned. I figured it was a good place to stop for a minute and catch our breath. Inside, it smelled like wet dirt and mold, but it was dry, and it gave us some cover. Miller sat on a rotting bench, wiping sweat from his forehead. I leaned against the doorway, eyes fixed on the trees. That's when I heard the sound again. A soft cry. "Mommy, please." It was farther this time, but still too close. Miller looked at me, afraid. "That voice, why does it sound like—" "Because it wants us to follow it," I said. "It's playing with us." The crying stopped. A branch snapped outside, then another, closer, and then the laughter. Not loud, not funny, just a low, broken chuckle. Like someone who didn't know how to laugh but was trying anyway, trying to sound human. It echoed through the trees. Miller stood up fast, hand on his pistol. "We have to leave." "Wait," I said, pulling out a small map from my back pocket. I unfolded it on the floor, pointing at a spot up north. "There used to be an old trap site here, built decades ago. It's not far. If we can get there, we might have a chance." "A trap?" "Pits, covered with wood and leaves. Big enough to hold a bear, or bigger." Miller looked unsure, but he nodded. "Lead the way." We stepped back into the forest. Every noise made me jump. A bird flapping its wings, a twig snapping under my boot. The sound of breathing that didn't belong to either of us. It was getting closer, too close. We picked up our pace, and then, out of nowhere, a shape darted through the trees. Just a blur. Tall, fast, silent. We stopped in our tracks. Miller raised, his flashlight scanning the forest. "Where did it go?" I didn't answer, because I was staring at something else. A tree, thick, wide, old. And high up on the bark, at least 10 feet above the ground, were claw marks. Fresh ones. Deep. That thing wasn't just fast, it could climb. My mouth felt dry. I turned to Miller. "Don't run, no matter what happens." "Why?" "Because if it chases us, we won't make it." We walked in silence after that, but something had changed. The forest felt wrong. Not just tense, not just scary. It felt alive, like it was leaning in, listening. We passed another blood trail, this one, smaller, fainter, maybe older. I didn't follow it, I didn't want to know, and then I heard it again. The same voice. But this time, it whispered my name. Geneva. I stopped cold. The hairs on my arm stood straight up. Miller turned to me. "What?" "Nothing," I lied, because how could I explain it? That was my son's voice, but my son was gone. I closed my eyes for just a second, just to push back the sting in them. When I opened them again, I saw something move behind a tree. It was watching, still hiding, but closer now. We were being hunted, and it wasn't hiding anymore. The thing had been following us for over an hour now, maybe longer, always just out of sight, always just far enough to make you doubt what you saw. But that moment, when I saw it move behind the tree, it changed everything. Miller saw my face. He raised his flashlight, shining it between the trunks. The beam caught nothing but leaves and branches. Empty space. But I knew it was still there. I took a deep breath and whispered, "We're close to the trap pit." "How close?" 10 minutes, maybe less." Miller nodded and gripped his pistol tighter. We walked faster now, careful not to make too much noise. Every step felt louder than it should. The wind was gone. The forest was still. Even the air felt like it was holding itself back. Then something changed again. That smell came back. Rotten fur, wet soil, and underneath it, that sharp copper scent like fresh blood. I looked up. The moon was slipping behind clouds. The shadows around us thickened. And then we heard it. The howl, long, deep, not like a wolf. Lower, like it came from something that had lungs too big for its body. It shook the air, Miller stopped walking. "That's not a coyote." "No," I said, heart pounding, "it's not." And then we saw it just ahead. It stepped out from behind the trees. 7 feet tall, maybe more. Long arms, legs bent the wrong way. Its body was covered in thick, matted hair, but the skin around its chest and neck was stretched and scarred. Its hands, if you could even call them that, ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. And its face, it had a snout like a wolf, but longer. Its mouth was slightly open, showing rows of yellow sharp teeth. And its eyes, those glowing amber eyes, locked onto mine. It didn't growl, it didn't charge. It just stood there, staring. Miller raised his pistol. "Don't move," he whispered. The dogman tilted its head. Then it opened its mouth wider and spoke. Not words, just a sound, a voice, a child's voice. "Mommy." But it didn't come from its mouth. It echoed around us. High-pitched. Wrong. Like a recording played through a broken speaker. Miller took a step back, shaking. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't speak. My legs felt frozen. My hand reached into my backpack without thinking and gripped the baseball, the one my son used to carry everywhere. I held it tight. The dogman blinked. Then, in a blur, it was gone, vanished between the trees without a sound. "Run," I said, finally finding my voice. "Now." We ran. Branches slapped our faces. Roots tried to trip us, but we didn't stop. I remembered the old ranger trap, the pit they'd dug decades ago to catch black bears. I'd only seen it once, years back, overgrown and half forgotten. I prayed. It was still there. We reached the clearing. The moon broke through the clouds for just a second, just enough light to see the edge of the pit. It was still there, covered with broken branches and old leaves, but the cover had mostly rotted through. Perfect. I turned to Miller. "We're going to use it." "Use it how?" "Lure it in. Get it to chase us. One of us has to run past the pit. The other hides behind and waits." His face went pale. "You want to use me as bait?" "No," I said. "I'll do it." He looked at me for a second, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm not leaving you." I smiled just a little. "You're a good man, Miller. We didn't have time to plan much more, because it was here again, behind. Close." I stood up, stepped into the clearing, and shouted, "Come on then, I'm right here." Something moved in the trees. Fast. Too fast. The dogman burst into the clearing, charging on 2 legs, snarling as it ran. It was faster than anything I'd ever seen. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned and sprinted straight past the pit, right over the weak cover. It held just long enough. I dove forward, rolled on the ground, and looked back. The dogman hit the trap dead on. The wood broke beneath its weight, dropped with a loud, awful thud, snapping branches and snarling as it fell. Miller was already there, pulling the kerosene can from his bag. I struck a flare. Lit, red, hot, angry. Without a second thought, I tossed it in. The pit went up in flames. The dogman's howl this time was no trick. It was pain. Real pain, screaming, thrashing, burning. The flames lit the trees, casting tall, dancing shadows. The air filled with the smell of burnt hair and meat. It was awful, but we didn't look away. We stayed there until the fire died down, until the screaming stopped, until it was just smoke, just silence. The smoke wouldn't clear. It felt like the fire had stopped, but the smell stayed. Burnt fur, burnt flesh, and then something else. Something that made your stomach turn, like rotting meat left in the sun. Miller and I stood at the edge of the pit, not saying anything. The flames had gone. Low, but I could still hear faint crackles, tiny pops from whatever was down there. It didn't move anymore, and yet I didn't feel safe. Not really. I looked at Miller. He had sweat pouring down his face. His hand still held the empty kerosene can, fingers locked tight around it. Like, he didn't know what to do now. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He nodded, but it wasn't real. His mouth moved, but his eyes were stuck on the pit. I reached into my bag and took out the baseball. My son's. Held it for a second, then put it. But the trees were quiet, like they were waiting, like the whole forest was holding its breath again. But this time it wasn't fear. It felt like the end of something. We sat down near the edge of the clearing just to breathe. Rest, let our minds catch up. Then I saw it, on Miller's arm. 3 long scratches. Not deep, not bleeding too much. But fresh. When did that happen? I asked. He looked down, confused. I don't know, he didn't remember. That scared me more than the wound itself. You need to clean that, I said. Could be infected. He nodded slowly and opened his first aid kit. I turned back to the pit. The fire was nearly out. Just small orange embers glowing in the dark. I wanted to believe it was over. But something inside me wasn't sure. I'd seen what that thing could do. How it moved. How it tricked us with voices, with memories. Whatever it was. It wasn't. Just an animal. We waited until first light. Neither of us slept. The sun rose behind the trees, pale and cold. The morning air should have felt fresh, clean. It didn't. Smoke still drifted from the pit. Black. Thick. We made our way back to the station, slow and quiet. My legs ached. My hands were shaking. But we were alive. We gave our report. Didn't tell them everything. Just enough. 2 missing campers, possible animal attack. We responded, found signs of a large predator. Fire set to protect ourselves. No visual confirmation of species. They accepted it. They always do. A week later, Miller transferred out. Said he needed to be closer to family. Said the woods weren't for him. I understood. I stayed. Someone had to. They gave me a small medal, a letter of praise, a pat on the back. That didn't matter. What mattered was that it was over. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, during another night patrol, I came home to my cabin around midnight. The air was still, sky clear, crickets chirping like normal. I walked up the porch steps tired but calm, and then I saw it. On the wooden door, near the bottom, 3 long claw marks. Fresh. I stopped moving. Just stood there staring. No sound. No wind. Just those. Walks exactly like the ones at the campsite. I unlocked the door, heart pounding, and stepped inside. Everything was where I left it. Nothing broken. Nothing touched. Except one thing. My bag. The zipper was open, and the baseball was sitting in the middle of the floor. I didn't drop it. I didn't leave it there. I picked it up slowly, hands trembling. It was cold. That night, didn't sleep, just sat by the window with my flashlight in one hand and the baseball in the other. Because the worst part wasn't that it had come back. The worst part was it knew who I was. I didn't tell anyone about the claw marks on my door or the baseball on the floor. What would I even say? That something, burned alive in a pit 2 weeks ago, had come back? That it knew where I lived? That it touched my things? No one would believe it, and maybe I didn't believe it either. At least that's what I told myself. I kept working, did my rounds, smiled when people asked questions, but I never slept more than a few hours, and I never went out at night without my flashlight, a flare, and a small bottle of kerosene, just in case. Each day I checked the porch before stepping outside. I checked the windows before locking up. I walked around the cabin twice every evening, looking for tracks or scratches or anything strange. But for a while, nothing happened. The days passed. The forest went quiet again. But in a normal way this time. Birds chirped, wind blew through the trees. Even deer came out again. I started to think maybe it really was over. Maybe the thing we burned wasn't coming back. But then the new moon came. It was a cold, clear night. No clouds, no stars, just darkness. The kind of night where even your own house feels unfamiliar. I had a fire going inside, a book open on the table. I wasn't reading it, just staring at the pages, trying to feel normal. And then I heard it. 3 knocks on the door. Not hard, just soft. Like fingers or claws. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The fire cracked behind me. I waited. Another knock. Then, silence. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped toward the door. Didn't open it. Just placed my ear against the wood. Nothing. I waited a full minute, then slowly I unlocked it and opened the door, just a crack. The night was still. No wind, no sound, no one on the porch. I opened it wider, and that's when I saw it. Down at the ESE, edge of the trees, just past the fence line. A shape. Tall. Still too far to see clearly, but close enough that I knew. It was watching me. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But I felt it. The same cold in my chest. The same fear crawling up. My back, I wanted to shut the door and hide. But something in me was tired of hiding. So I stepped outside. Slowly. I walked off the porch, keeping the flashlight low, not wanting to shine it just yet. I moved down the path, toward the trees. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the fence, I stopped. The shape was gone, just empty trees. I scanned the woods. Still nothing. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I stood there for a while, waiting, listening. And then, softly, something whispered behind me. Not a growl, not a child's voice, not even words. Just breath, right next to my ear. I spun around, shining the flashlight. Nothing, no one. But on the porch steps, just where I had been, was the baseball. It hadn't been there before. It was placed perfectly in the center, like someone set it down gently. I walked back slowly, picked it up, and turned in every direction. No movement, no sounds. I went inside, locked the door, shut every window, and then I sat down by the fire, holding that baseball tight, and I cried, not out of fear, but because I knew deep down that what we saw that night, it wasn't just a creature. It was something older, something smarter, and it had marked me. It wasn't done, and next time it might not knock. The night my brother Tommy drowned in the bayou, the water sang. I was 16 then, watching from the shore as he waded deeper into the dark water, following a sound that only he could hear. That was 23 years ago, but I still remember his last words. "Curtis, don't you hear that beautiful music?" I never thought I'd end up working in a place like this. The Congaree National Park swamp stretches out before me like a flooded forest. Spanish moss hanging from ancient cypress trees like gray curtains. Water everywhere. As a park ranger, I've learned every sound this swamp makes, from the deep croaking of bullfrogs to the soft splash of turtles sliding off their logs. After quitting my life as a jazz trumpet player in New Orleans, I thought I'd left music behind. But the swamp has its own songs. Today started like any other day, with me doing my morning patrol in my little flat-bottom boat. The air was thick and humid, making my ranger uniform stick to my skin. Everything seemed normal until I heard it, a melody so faint I almost missed it. It reminded me of the sound that took Tommy, and my heart started racing. I killed the boat's motor and just listened. 20 years of playing jazz taught me to pick apart sounds like unraveling threads in a piece of cloth. This wasn't any natural swamp noise. It wasn't the wind in the trees or birds or any animal I knew. It was something else, something wrong. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Curtis, you there?" It was Maria, one of our newer rangers. "Ahead," I answered, my eyes scanning the murky water. "We've got another one." Her voice shook slightly. "Third person this month found, you know, like the others." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what she meant. Another drowning victim found, where no water should be. Last week we found a local teenager 40 feet up in a tree, his lungs full of swamp water. The week before that, a tourist was discovered in a sealed park bathroom, somehow drowned in 2 inches of puddle water. "Where?" I asked, already turning. "My boat around. Old church grounds, the abandoned one near marker 7, Curtis." She paused. "This one's different. They say the body, it's singing. A chill ran down my spine, even in the hot morning air. As I guided my boat toward marker 7, that faint melody grew stronger, and for the first time in my life, I wished I wasn't so good at identifying sounds, because what I was hearing wasn't possible. It was the voice of my dead brother Tommy, singing his favorite jazz tune clear as day. The swamp was calling, and this time, it was using voices I knew. I steered my boat through the narrow water paths between the trees, trying to shake off the sound of Tommy's voice. The morning fog hung low over the swamp, making everything look like a dream. But this was no dream. The cold sweat on my neck told me that much. When I reached the old church grounds, I saw 3 other ranger boats already there. The church itself was just a broken-down building now, half sunk into the swamp. Maria stood on what was left of the front steps, waving me over. Her face was pale. "You need to hear this," she said as I tied up my boat. I've never heard anything like it." We walked through the church's front door, our boots crunching on wet leaves. Inside, 2 other rangers, John and Pete, were standing near the back wall. Between them lay a body covered with a blue tarp. Water pooled around it, even though we were on dry ground. "Who found him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Morning jogger," John said. "Guy was running the trail when he heard singing coming from in here. Thought someone was having church service or something." He shook his head. "Found this instead." I knelt down beside the body. "You said it was singing?" Pete nodded. "Listen, we all got quiet. At first I heard nothing but the usual swamp sounds floating in through the broken windows. Then, there it was, a soft humming coming from under the tarp. It wasn't just any song. It was "When the Saints Go Marching In," the same tune Tommy was singing in my boat earlier. My hands shook as I pulled back the tarp. The victim was a man around 50, dressed in fishing clothes. His skin was pale and wrinkled like he'd been in water for hours, but his clothes were barely damp. And his throat, it was moving. Actually moving, like someone was playing it like an instrument. "We need to call in backup," Maria whispered. "This isn't normal." "Wait," I said, holding up my hand. Years of playing music had taught me to spot patterns in sound, and something about this wasn't right. I pulled out my old trumpet, tuner from my pocket. I always carried it for luck. When I turned it on, the needle went crazy, spinning back and forth like it was picking up dozens of frequencies at once. That's when we heard the splashing outside. We all rushed to the church windows. The water around our boats was moving in circles, but there wasn't any wind. As we watched, something broke the surface, something clear as glass, shaped like a human hand. It reached up, grabbed the side of John's boat, and pulled it under in one smooth motion. "Everyone, get to high ground!" I shouted. But as we turned to run, water started pouring in through every crack in the church walls. It wasn't normal water. It moved like it had a mind of its own, flowing uphill, creeping toward us like fingers. We scrambled onto the old wooden pews as the water rose. That's when I saw them for the first time, shapes moving under the surface. They looked human, but their skin was clear like crystal, and inside their chests, where hearts should be, there was nothing but swirling water and a soft, blue-green light. The singing from the dead man's body got louder, and more voices joined in. Voices I recognized from missing persons reports over the past month. The water creatures were using them like instruments, playing their vocal cords like strings on a guitar. "The door!" Maria screamed. "We need to get out!" But as we looked toward the entrance, my blood ran cold. Standing there, made entirely of moving water, was a figure I knew all too well. It had Tommy's face. "Curtis," it said in my brother's voice, "don't you want to hear my new song?" The water kept rising, and somewhere in the distance I could hear more voices joining the chorus. The melody makers had found us, and they were just getting started with their performance. My mind raced as the water crept up our legs. 20 years of ranger training told me to stay calm, but seeing Tommy's face made of water, that was something no training could prepare me for. "Back door!" I shouted over the growing chorus of voices. "Move slow, don't splash!" We backed away from Water Tommy, stepping carefully from pew to pew. The singing got louder with each step, and more of those glass-like creatures rose from the flood. They moved like dancers, their clear bodies catching the morning light that leaked through the church windows. Maria grabbed my arm. "Curtis, look!" She pointed at the body we'd found. It was gone, but there was something else in its place. One of the water creatures had the man's vocal cords stretched between its fingers like guitar strings, playing them with gentle touches. That's when it hit me. "They're not just drowning. People," I whispered. "They're collecting instruments." The creature with Tommy's face smiled, and it was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen. Water dripped from its lips as it spoke. "You always were good at figuring out music, little brother." I pushed Maria toward the back door. "Run. All of you, run." We splashed through the rising water, but it felt like swimming through syrup, thick and slow. The creatures weren't chasing us. They were playing with us, making the water pull at our feet, trying to trip us. We finally made it to the back door, but what we saw outside made us freeze. The whole swamp was wrong. The water had risen so high that the trees looked like they were floating, and hanging from every branch, like Christmas ornaments made of glass, were more of the melody makers. But worst of all was what we saw in the distance. About 50 yards away, where the water was deepest, hundreds of these things had gathered, in a circle. In the middle was what looked like an underwater graveyard, but it wasn't full of bodies. It was full of floating vocal cords, all stretched out like strings on some giant, horrible instrument. And they were all singing. "The choir," John whispered. "They're building a choir." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and started recording the sound. If we survived this, someone needed to know what was happening here. Pete grabbed my shoulder. "Curtis, your ears." I touched my ear and felt something warm. Blood. The singing was getting so loud it was hurting us physically. But there was something familiar about the pattern of the sound. It reminded me of something from my jazz days. "Everyone, cover your ears," I shouted. I dug in my pocket and pulled out my trumpet tuner again. There was something about the frequency these creatures were using. If I could just figure it out. But before I could do anything, Water Tommy appeared right in front of me, rising up from the flood like a terrible fountain. "Join us, Curtis," it said, reaching out with a hand made of swirling water. "You can play with Tommy again, forever." Behind him, I saw more water shapes forming. Mom, Dad, old friends who died over the years, all of them made of crystal clear water, all of them singing that horrible, beautiful song. The water was up to our chests now, and I could feel it pulling us toward that underwater choir. John screamed as something grabbed his leg, and we watched in horror as he was yanked under the surface. I had seconds to make a choice. The tuner in my hand was going crazy, but now I understood why. These things weren't just making music. They were using specific frequencies to control the water itself. And if that was true, maybe there was a way to fight back. I just hoped I could figure it out before we all became part of their eternal choir. I've never moved so fast in my life. As John disappeared under the water, I yelled to Maria and Pete, "The ranger station, we need the sound equipment." The water was chest deep now, but we fought against it, pushing toward where we'd left our last boat. The melody makers swirled around us, their watery bodies glowing that eerie blue-green. They kept singing, using the voices they'd stolen, making the most beautiful and terrible music I'd ever heard. "Look," Pete pointed up. In the trees above us, more victims hung suspended in bubbles of water, their vocal cords being played like violins. The sound was so loud now that water rippled in patterns around us. We finally reached the boat, but only Maria and Pete could climb in. The water creatures were holding onto my legs, pulling me back. Water Tommy floated in front of me again. "Let them go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Take me instead." Tommy's watery face smiled. "But brother, we need a whole orchestra." I looked at Maria. "Get to the station. The big speakers from last month's park event. Bring them here. We can't leave you," Maria shouted. "Go." I watched. them speed away as the water creatures pulled me toward their underwater choir. I kept my hand tight around my tuner, watching the needle dance. There was a pattern here. I just needed to figure it out. The melody makers dragged me deeper into the swamp. I saw John floating in one of their water bubbles, still alive but trapped. His eyes were open, following me as I passed. The creatures took me to the center of their choir circle, where hundreds of vocal cords floated like spider webs in the water, all connected to each other. Water Tommy spoke again. "You'll love it here, Curtis. The music never stops." I looked at my tuner again. The needle was swinging between two specific frequencies. Then it hit me. They were using harmonics. Just like in jazz. Two notes played together to create a third sound. That's how they controlled the water. Suddenly, a loud engine roar cut through the singing. Maria and Pete were back, their boat loaded with huge speakers. They'd also brought something else. My old trumpet from the ranger stations, lost and found. "The speakers!" I shouted. "Set them up in a triangle." They worked fast, placing the speakers on patches of high ground. The melody makers watched, curious but not worried. They thought it was just more music for their choir. Water Tommy floated closer. "What song will you play for us, brother?" I smiled, even though I was terrified. "One you taught me." Maria turned on the speakers. I put the tuner near one of them and watched the needle. Then I raised the trumpet to my lips and played the highest note I could. A B flat that I knew would clash with their harmonics. The effect was instant. The water rippled violently, and the melody makers writhed like they were in pain. I kept playing, matching the frequency on my tuner, creating a sound that fought against their control of the water. The creatures screamed, not with stolen voices now, but with a sound like ice cracking. Their clear bodies started to break apart. Water Tommy reached for me one last time. "Curtis, the music." "I'm sorry, Tommy," I whispered between notes. "But you're not really my brother." I took a deep breath and played one final note, holding it as long as I could. The sound bounced between the speakers, growing stronger and stronger. The melody makers shattered like glass, their watery bodies falling back into normal swamp water. The stolen vocal cords dissolved, releasing their final songs into the morning air. As the last note faded, I felt something pop in my ears. Blood trickled down my neck, and the world went quiet, completely quiet. I couldn't hear anything, not even my own breathing. I'd blown out my eardrums. But when I looked around, the swamp was back to normal. John and the other victims were floating, safely on the surface, alive but confused. Maria and Pete were pulling people into boats, everyone moving in a silence I knew would last forever. I touched my throat, feeling the vibrations as I spoke. It's over. But sometimes, in the deepest part of night when I'm lying in bed, in the perfect silence of my new world, I swear I can still hear them singing. 3 months later, the doctors say I'll never hear again. That's okay. I've made peace with the silence. The Park Service gave me a special award for saving everyone, but they also moved me to a desk job. Can't really be a field ranger when you can't hear danger coming. I'm learning sign language now. Maria comes by every day after her shift to practice with me. She signs slowly, telling me about the swamp. Everything's back to normal out there, she says. The water levels are regular. No more drownings, no more singing. They found 23 survivors total, including John. Most of them don't remember what happened. The ones who do won't talk about it. Can't say I blame them. I visited the old church last week. It's just a broken building again, slowly sinking into the swamp. The water around it is brown and normal, full of regular swamp life, frogs, fish, and birds. I sat there for a while, watching the sun set through the cypress trees. Someone put up a memorial near the church. It lists the names of everyone who didn't make it. All the people the melody makers took before we stopped them. Tommy's name is there too, even though he died long ago. I added it myself. Seemed right somehow. I still have my trumpet, but I haven't. Tried to play it. Don't know if I ever will. Hard to play music when you can't hear it, but sometimes I hold it and remember that last note, the one that shattered the water creatures and saved everyone. The weird thing is, even though I can't hear anything else, I still get woken up some nights by a sound. It's faint, like a whisper, but I know it's real. It's the sound of water moving in impossible ways, and voices harmonizing in the darkness. Last night I woke up to that sound again. I got out of bed and went to my window. The moon was full, making the trees cast long shadows. For a second, I thought I saw something in my front yard, a shape made of clear water, glowing soft blue-green. It looked like Tommy. I closed my curtains and went back to bed. Some mysteries are better left alone. Some songs should stay unsung, but I keep my old tuner on my bedside table, its battery fresh and ready, just in case the melody makers decide they need one more voice for their choir. Because the thing about music is, once you know how to play it, you never really forget. And somewhere out there in the deepest parts of the swamp where the water runs clear as glass, I know they're still practicing their songs. They're just waiting for the right moment to start their next performance. I wrote my report for the Park Service about what happened. They locked it away in some filing cabinet in Washington, D.C., but I kept a copy. And if you're reading this, it means you've found it. So let me give you some advice. If you're ever in the swamps and you hear music that sounds too beautiful, to be real, run as fast as you can, and whatever you do, don't sing along. Curtis Walker, former Park Ranger, Congaree National Park. The scream echoed through the mist at exactly 3:17 a.m. I know because I was staring at my watch, trying to convince myself to go back to sleep in my ranger cabin. But sleep hasn't been my friend since I lost my research team 5 years ago inside these same woods. My name is Jennifer Rodriguez, and I'm a park ranger at Olympic National Park. Before this, I was a wildlife biologist studying primate behavior. That was until that terrible day when my entire research team vanished without a trace. Now at 38, I'm back here trying to make sense of things that don't make any sense at all. This morning's scream wasn't the first strange thing to happen lately. The park has been different these past few weeks. The familiar misty mornings have turned into something else. Thick, permanent walls of white that never lift. It's like the forest is hiding behind a curtain, keeping secrets. I grabbed my flashlight and ranger jacket, my hand shaking slightly as I radioed into base. This is Ranger Rodriguez. Heard a disturbance near Sector 7, going to check it out. Copy that, Rodriguez, came the crackly response. Be careful out there. Weather's weird again. Weird was an understatement. As I stepped outside, the mist swirled around my boots like living thing. The animals knew something was wrong too. Just yesterday I saw entire herds of deer running from the ancient groves, places where they'd lived for generations. They were scared of something, and animals don't scare easily. My flashlight beam cut through the fog, but it wasn't much help. The light just bounced back at me, creating strange shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The old trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching down like fingers through the mist. That's when I found the first sign that this wasn't going to be a normal missing person case. Near the trail marker, partially hidden by fallen leaves, was a petroglyph I'd never seen before. I'd worked these trails for years, but this was new, or very, very old. The carved stone showed tall figures, giants really, standing over smaller ones. The smaller figures were arranged in perfect lines like they were being controlled. My radio crackled, making me jump. Rodriguez, we've got another report. Hiking group of 5 hasn't checked in. Last seen near your location. I felt my throat tighten. 5 people. Just like my research team 5 years ago. Copy that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm on it. As I walked deeper into the forest, the mist grew thicker. My flashlight beam caught something that made my heart stop. Footprints in the mud. But these weren't from any animal I knew, and definitely not human. They were huge, over 20 inches long, and deeper than they should be, like whatever made them weighed several hundred pounds. The scream came again, closer this time. But there was something wrong about it. It wasn't scared or panicked. It was empty, like someone screaming in their sleep. I've heard a lot of strange things in these woods, but nothing like this. I should have called for backup. I should have waited for daylight. But 5 people were missing and I couldn't lose another group to these woods. Not again. So I followed the footprints, my heart pounding with each step, into a part of the forest that felt different than anything I'd experienced before. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. The mist was hiding something bigger than I could imagine, and those footprints were leading me straight to it. Sometimes I wonder if I should have turned back that morning. But deep down, I know I couldn't have. The forest had been waiting for me to return, and now it had my attention. And somewhere in that mist, something had mine too. I followed the footprints through the fog, my flashlight beam shaking slightly with each step. The woods were quieter than they should be. No owls, no crickets, not even the rustle of leaves in the wind. Just silence. That's when I saw the first tree marking. At first I thought someone had splashed paint on the trunk, but as I got closer, I realized it was glowing. A soft blue-green light pulsed from the bark in a pattern that looked almost like writing. I'd studied these forests for years, but I'd never seen anything like this. I took out my phone to take a picture, but every shot came out blurry, like the light was moving between frames. "Base, this is Rodriguez," I whispered into my radio. "I've found some kind of glowing markings on the trees." "Over." Static was my only answer. I wrote down the location in my notebook. Old habits from my research days die hard. As I was writing, I heard something that made me freeze. Footsteps. Not just one person, but many walking in perfect rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Through the mist, I saw them. The missing hiking group. 5 people walking in a straight line. Their movements exactly the same, like soldiers marching. But something was wrong. Their eyes were open but empty, staring straight ahead at nothing. "Hello?" I called out, keeping my voice low. "I'm Ranger Rodriguez. Are you all right?" They didn't even blink, just kept walking, perfectly in step with each other. I'd seen group hypnosis before. It was part of my research on primate social behavior. But this was different. This was wrong. I followed them at a safe distance, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The hikers moved like they knew exactly where they were going, even though the trail had ended half a mile back. They stepped over fallen logs and around thorny bushes without looking down, never breaking their rhythm. Then I felt it. A deep rumble so low I could barely hear it, but I could feel it in my chest. It reminded me of the time I'd studied elephants in Africa, how they used infrasound to communicate over long distances. But this was stronger, and it made me feel dizzy just listening to it. I pulled out my field recorder, another old habit, and pressed record. The screen showed sound waves at frequencies that shouldn't exist in nature. As I watched the hikers, I noticed their steps matched the rhythm of that strange sound perfectly. My head started to feel fuzzy, like I was falling asleep standing up. I pinched my arm hard, focusing on the pain to stay alert. Whatever was affecting these people was trying to affect me too. Through the trees ahead, something moved, something big. My flashlight caught it for just a second, a shadow darker than the night, stretching up into the mist. The beam flickered across what looked like glowing marks on its surface, the same blue-green color as the tree markings. I fumbled with my camera, hands shaking as I tried to take a picture. The flash went off, lighting up the forest for a split second. In that moment I saw it clearly. A massive figure, easily 12 feet tall, with long arms that nearly touched the ground. But the photo showed only empty forest when I checked. The hikers changed direction suddenly, all at the same time, heading straight toward where I'd seen the figure. I wanted to run after them, to grab them and shake them awake, but something deep in my gut told me that would be a terrible mistake. Instead, I marked another note in my book with shaking hands. Hikers moving north, following something, or something's leading them. The deep sound got stronger, and my vision started to blur. I stumbled backward, forcing myself to turn away from the hikers in that terrible shadow. Every step felt like walking through mud, but I made myself keep going until the sound faded and my head started to clear. Back at my cabin, I locked the door and sat down to write my report. My hands were still shaking as I typed. Found missing hikers showing signs of... I stopped. Signs of what? Mind control? Mass hypnosis? Who would believe that? But I knew what I'd seen. And worse, I knew this was just the beginning. Because that thing in the forest, whatever it was, reminded me of the petroglyphs, the giant figures controlling the smaller ones. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible thought was forming. What if this was what took my research team 5 years ago? I looked out my window at the mist swirling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 5 people were walking through the forest like puppets on strings, and something was pulling those strings. Something that could bend light, control minds, and make sound that shouldn't exist. Tomorrow, I'd have to go back out there. But tonight, I sat in my cabin, listening to the recording of that impossible sound, trying to understand what I was really dealing with. Because one thing was clear. This wasn't just about finding missing hikers anymore. This was about finding answers to questions I'd been asking for 5 long years. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I drove to the park's archives, a small room filled with dusty files and old newspapers. If I was going to understand what was happening, I needed to look into the past. "Hey, Charlie," I called out to the archive keeper, an old ranger who'd worked here for 40 years. "I need to see any files about missing persons in the park." Charlie looked up from his coffee, his face serious. "How far back?" "As far as they go." 2 hours later, I sat surrounded by manila folders, my stomach turning as I read report after report. 50 years of people vanishing in these woods. Some were found, confused, with no memory of what happened. Most were never seen again. But there was a pattern I'd never noticed before. Varied disappearance happened during periods of heavy mist, and they all took place in or near the ancient groves, the same areas the animals were running from now. "Jennifer?" A voice made me jump. It was Mike, one of my team members. "We found something you should see." 20 minutes later, we stood in front of a cave entrance I'd never noticed before. The mist had pulled back just enough to reveal ancient drawings on the rock wall. They were like the petroglyph I'd found yesterday, but there were more of them. Many more. "These weren't here before," Mike said, running his flashlight over the drawings. "I walked this trail 3 times a week. This whole cave entrance was covered in vines until yesterday." The drawings told a story. The first showed the high, giant figures arriving in a mist. Then came images of people walking in lines just like the hikers I'd seen. The final drawing showed the giants leading groups of people into a circle of trees. "There's something else," Mike said, his voice shaking a little. He pointed to a mark carved below the drawings. "Look familiar?" My heart stopped. It was the same glowing symbol I'd seen on the trees last night. But this carving was old, very old. "Mike, I need you to..." I turned but stopped mid-sentence. Mike was standing completely still, his head tilted like he was listening to something. "Mike?" I touched his arm. He didn't move. Then I heard it. That deep sound from last night vibrating in my chest. Mike's eyes went blank, just like the hikers. "No." I grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "Mike, wake up!" He started walking, his movements stiff and unnatural. I tried to hold him back, but it was like trying to stop a machine. He just kept moving, heading deeper into the forest. Base. "This is..." "Rodriguez," I yelled into my radio. "I need backup at the North Cave site. Officer down or officer..." How could I explain what was really happening? The radio crackled. "Copy that, Rodriguez. What's your situation?" But before I could answer, 2 more of my team members emerged. From the trees, Sarah and Tom. They were walking in perfect step with each other, their faces empty. They must have heard the same sound. That deep rumble grew stronger. My vision started to blur again, but this time I was ready. I pulled out my phone and played the loudest song I had on full volume through my earbuds. The regular music beat helped me focus, pushing back against that strange sound. I followed my team from a distance, fighting the urge to run after them. They were heading toward the ancient groves, just like in the cave drawings. Just like my research team 5 years ago. The mist grew thicker as we walked. Through the white haze, I saw more glowing symbols on the trees, pulsing brighter now. My team walked right past them, their steps never faltering. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tied to one of the trees was a backpack. Not just any backpack, but one I recognized. It had belonged to David, a member of my old research team. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was his journal, the pages warped from years in the weather. The last entry was dated 5 years ago, the day they disappeared. The words made my heart stop. The sound is getting stronger, can't think straight. The others are already walking, giant shapes in the mist. They're leading us somewhere. Jennifer, if you find this, stay away from the grove. They're building something. A connection. A hive. The writing trailed off the page. I looked up to see my team disappearing into the mist. The sound was getting stronger, trying to pull me along with them. But now I knew, this thing, whatever it was, had taken my old team. And now it was taking my new one. But this time was different. This time I had proof. This time I was ready. I marked my location on my GPS and started walking back, my music still blasting in my ears. I needed to get help, real help. Because tomorrow, I was going into those ancient groves. And this time I was going to find out what happened to both my teams. As I walked away, I could have sworn I heard something huge moving through the trees behind me. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because I knew if I saw those glowing marks again, if I heard that sound without my music, I might end up just like the others, walking in line toward something terrible in the mist. I spent that night in my cabin preparing. I packed my backpack with everything I could think of. Extra batteries, a better flashlight, my phone loaded with loud music, and David's old journal. I also brought something new, a device that measures sound waves. If that thing was using sound to control people, I needed to understand how. The sun wasn't up yet when I started walking. The mist was thicker than ever, clinging to everything, like wet cotton. My earbuds were in, playing rock music just in case. "Base, this is Rodriguez," I said into my radio. "Heading into Section 8 to search for missing personnel." I didn't expect an answer. The radio hadn't worked right since yesterday. The forest felt different this morning. The trees seemed to lean inward like they were watching me. Every few steps I found another glowing symbol, each one brighter than the last. They were leading somewhere. Then I saw her, Sarah, one of my team members from yesterday. She was just standing there, staring at nothing. But something was wrong. She wasn't alone. Around her were other people, the hikers from 2 nights ago. An old man I recognized from a missing persons report, and others I didn't know. They were all just waiting. I turned down my music slightly, and my sound devices, screen lit up like a Christmas tree. That deep, strange sound was everywhere, but it was different now. It had a pattern, like a heartbeat. "Sarah," I whispered, "can you hear me?" She turned her head, but not toward me. All of them turned, looking at the same spot in the mist. That's when I felt it. Something massive moving behind me. I spun around, and there it was, no more than 20 feet away. The creature, the giant. It was huge, at least 12 feet tall, with long arms that hung down past its knees. Its skin was dark like old tree bark, but covered in those same glowing marks I'd seen on the trees. They pulsed in rhythm with that deep sound. But its eyes, they were what scared me most. They weren't animal eyes or human eyes. They were something else, something old and smart and terrible. I raised my camera with shaking hands and took a picture. This time the flash didn't make it disappear. Instead, the creature tilted its head like it was curious. The sound got stronger. My music wasn't enough anymore. I felt my thoughts getting fuzzy, like they were being pushed aside to make room for something else. Something that wasn't me. Through my blurring vision, I saw more people walking out of the mist. They moved like they were all part of one body, one mind. And in my head, I started to feel what they were feeling. A connection, a pull toward something bigger than myself. "No," I whispered, forcing myself to look down at David's journal in my hands. The last thing he wrote. "They're building something." Connection. A hive. I understood now. This creature wasn't just controlling people, it was connecting them. like a computer network, and it wanted me to join. With the last bit of clear thought I had, I turned my music up all the way and ran. I ran until I couldn't hear that terrible sound anymore, until I couldn't feel the pull in my head. When I finally stopped, I was lost. The mist was too thick to see more than a few feet ahead, but my phone was still recording everything from my pocket. The sound patterns, the time, the GPS location. I had proof now, real proof. I looked at the picture I'd taken. The creature was there, clear as day. Its glowing marks made a pattern that looked almost like words in a language I'd never seen. But the scariest part, in the picture, all the people standing near it were glowing too. Just slightly, but their skin had the same marks starting to appear, including Sarah. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just controlling people's minds. It was changing them. And somewhere in these woods, my old research team might be part of its hive too. I had to get back to my cabin. I needed to study these readings to understand what I was dealing with. Because tomorrow I would have to go deeper into the woods, to the ancient grove where both my teams had disappeared. As I walked back, I kept my music playing, and my eyes straight ahead. But I could feel it watching me from somewhere in the mist. And worse, now that it had touched my mind once, I could feel something new inside my thoughts. Like a door had been opened that I couldn't quite close. The creature had gotten a taste of my mind, and I knew it wasn't done with me yet. Back in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing marks. Worse, I could still feel that empty space in my head where the creature had tried to get in, like a fingerprint left on my mind. I spent the night studying the sound recordings and the photo. The glowing marks on the creature made patterns, almost like a map. When I lined up my GPS tracking with the park map, I realized something. All the symbols pointed to one place, the oldest grove in the park. By morning, I knew I had to go there, but this time I had a plan. I grabbed my noise-canceling headphones, the expensive kind that blocks out everything, better than earbuds. I also took my sound recorder, camera, and something else, an old emergency radio that makes a high-pitched warning sound. If the creature used low sounds to control minds, maybe high sounds could hurt it. The walk to the grove took 2 hours. The mist was so thick now that I had to use my compass. Every few minutes I marked my path with bright orange tape. If something went wrong, I wanted others to be able to find me. Then I saw it. The grove. Ancient trees formed a perfect circle, their branches twisting together overhead like fingers holding hands. But what I saw inside made me freeze. People, dozens of them, standing perfectly still like statues. Some were my team members, some were the missing hikers, and others I recognized from 5-year-old missing person reports. They weren't dead. They were breathing, their eyes open but empty. Glowing marks flickered under their skin, pulsing together like they shared one heartbeat. "Oh God," I whispered. "David?" He was there, my old research partner, just standing, staring at nothing. The same age as when he disappeared 5 years ago, like time had frozen for him. I took out my camera, my hands shaking as I snapped pictures. The grove was full of that deep sound now, so strong that I could feel it in my teeth even through my headphones. That's when I understood what the creature was doing. It wasn't just controlling these people. It was connecting them, like a computer linking to other computers. Every person here was part of its network, its hive. I had to get closer to try to wake them up. But as I stepped into the grove, something changed. The glowing marks on everyone's skin got brighter. They all turned their heads at exactly the same time, looking right at me. Then I heard it, not with my ears. My headphones blocked all sound. I heard it in my mind. "Join us." The voice wasn't just one voice. It was everyone's voice all at once, my old team, my new team, all of them speaking together in my head. "We are more together. We are whole. Join us." I stumbled backward, my head spinning. Through the mist, I saw it, the creature stepping into the grove. But now I could see it clearly. It wasn't just one. giant thing. It was made of people, dozens of bodies all glowing with those strange marks, merged together into one huge shape. And as I watched, the people in the grove started walking toward it, their movements perfectly matched. "No," I said, backing away. "This isn't right. You're not making them whole. You're taking them away." More voices filled my head, trying to convince me, showing me memories that weren't mine, feelings that belonged to others. The creature was trying to download itself into my brain. I grabbed the emergency radio from my bag, my fingers fumbling with the switch. The creature reached for me with its long arms. Arms I now saw were made of human hands all lined up together. Just before its fingers touched me, I turned the radio on full blast. The high-pitched warning sound shot through the air. The creature jerked back. The glowing marks on everyone flickered like a broken light. For just a second, all the people in the grove seemed to wake up. David's eyes met mine, and I saw him, the real him, looking back at me with terror. Then the creature steadied itself. The marks glowed brighter. Everyone went still again. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, following my orange tape markers through the mist. Behind me, I felt the creature's anger pounding in my head. But now I knew something important. The sound had hurt it. Just for a moment, but it had worked. And tomorrow was the lunar eclipse, when the forest would be at its darkest. Maybe, just maybe, that was when the creature would be at its weakest too. I had one chance to save everyone. But first, I had to figure out how to fight something that could control minds. As I locked myself in my cabin, I could still feel it out there, watching, waiting. And somewhere in the ancient grove, all those people were still standing, dreaming. Someone else's dreams, including both my teams. Tomorrow would be my last chance to bring them back. The lunar eclipse would start at midnight. I spent all day preparing, filling my backpack with everything I could think of to fight something that could control minds. I had 6 emergency radios, all set to make that high-pitched warning sound. Tests showed the sound was strongest at exactly 2300 hertz, the kind of high pitch that makes your teeth hurt. I also had my noise-canceling headphones, extra batteries, and flares. The creature seemed to like the dark, so maybe bright light would hurt it too. At 11:30 p.m., I started walking toward the grove. The mist was thicker than ever, glowing slightly under the full moon. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I had to try. For David. For my teams. For everyone stuck in that terrible hive mind. The creature knew I was coming. I could feel it in my head, like a whisper getting louder with each step. But this time, I was ready for it. "Join us," the voices started again. "Be part of something bigger." "Get out of my head," I whispered, turning on my first radio. The high pitch cut through the air. The whispers faded a bit. When I reached the grove, they were all still there, standing, waiting. But something was different. The glowing marks on their skin were dimmer, like they were having trouble staying bright in the moonlight. I checked my watch. 11:55 p.m. Almost time. The creature stepped out of the shadows. Up close, I could see it clearly now. Hundreds of bodies, merged together, all moving as one. Its glowing marks made patterns across its huge shape, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Let them go," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. The creature tilted its massive head. "They are not prisoners. They are part of us now. And soon you will be too." The voice in my head was so strong it made me dizzy. I stumbled, nearly dropping my radio. The creature reached for me with its long arms made of human hands all lined up together. That's when the eclipse started. The moon began to go dark. As the shadow crept across it, the glowing marks on the creature started to flicker. It looked weaker. Now was my chance. I turned on all 6 radios at once. The high-pitched sound hit like a wave. The creature jerked back, its huge shape trembling. The glowing marks started going out like dying lights. But I wasn't ready for what happened next. All around me, people started screaming. Real screams. Not the empty ones from before. They were waking up and they were terrified. "Run!" I shouted. "Everyone run!" Some did. They broke free and ran into the mist. But others started walking toward the ravine at the edge of the grove. The creature was losing control, but it wasn't giving up. It was trying to take them with it. I saw David in the line walking to the ravine. Sarah, too. Their eyes were blank again, but tears were running down their faces. Somewhere inside they were awake and scared. I had to choose. Chase after the ones who escaped, or try to save the ones still under control. I ran toward the ravine line. The creature's voice slammed into my head, stronger than ever. If we cannot have them, no one will. The pain in my head was so bad I could barely see. But I kept running, kept holding up the radios. Their batteries were dying, the sound was getting weaker. I grabbed David's arm, trying to pull him back. He was crying, but kept walking. Sarah was just 2 steps from the ravine's edge. "Please," I begged. "Fight it. You're stronger than this thing. You're human. You're yourself. Remember who you are." The moon went completely dark. For one terrible moment, everything was black. I couldn't see the creature, couldn't see David, couldn't see anything. Then the creature screamed. Not in my head this time, a real scream that shook the trees. The glowing marks went out completely. When the light started coming back, I was holding David at the edge of the ravine. Sarah was on the ground nearby. They were awake, really awake. But the others, I wasn't fast enough for all of them. The creature was gone. Just gone. Like the mist had swallowed it. But it left behind a silence that felt like it would last forever. We found most of the people who ran. They were confused, scared, but alive. Some didn't remember anything. Others remembered too much. But the ones who went over the ravine, all we found were footprints at the edge. I sit in my cabin. Now, writing this report, my hands don't shake anymore, but sometimes I still hear whispers in my head. Probably always will. The forest is quiet again. Normal. The mist is just mist. But we all know it's still out there somewhere. Waiting. Growing stronger. And sometimes, on very dark nights, I see glowing marks on the trees. Like it's trying to write something. Like it's trying to tell us it's not finished with us yet. 3 months have passed since that night in the grove. The official report says we found 23 missing people, all suffering from mass hysteria, caused by toxic fungus in the old trees. That's what people want to believe. It's easier than the truth. David is getting better. The doctors can't explain why he hasn't aged in 5 years, so they don't try anymore. He doesn't remember much, which is probably a blessing, but sometimes he wakes up screaming, his skin glowing faintly in the dark. The marks fade by morning, but we both know what it means. Sarah took a job at a different park. She calls me sometimes, always when the moon is full, always to ask the same question. Do you still hear it? The whispers? I do. We all do. Everyone who made it out of the grove that night. It's like a radio playing very far away, trying to tune itself to our thoughts. The doctors gave us medicine for it, but they don't understand. The voice isn't in our ears. It's in our heads. I'm leading a new research team now, not to study animals anymore. We're looking for patterns, missing person reports, weather changes, places where the mist acts strange. The creature left marks all over the country, like a trail of breadcrumbs. We follow them, document them, try to understand them. Last week, I got a call from a ranger in Montana. She said hikers there were walking in perfect lines through the fog. I took the first flight out. My backpack is always ready now. Inside are noise-canceling headphones, emergency radios set to that special high pitch, and something new, a device that measures the space between sound waves. Because that's what the creature used, the empty space between sounds, where it could hide its signals to our brains. David asked me once why I don't just walk away from all this. Find a normal job, try to forget, but I can't, because I know something. Nobody else does. Something I learned from those ancient cave drawings. The creature isn't just one thing. It's not even the first of its kind. It's part of something bigger. Something older than the forests themselves. And it's not just hiding in the mist, it's building something. An army, a family. We don't know yet. But we will. Because every time it takes someone, every time it tries to build its hive mind, it leaves a piece of itself behind. In the trees, in the air, in our heads. And one day those pieces will lead us to where it came from. Sometimes at night, I stand at my cabin window and look at the mist moving through the trees. My skin tingles. Where the creature touched my mind, like a scar that won't quite heal. And in the silence between sounds, in the shadows between shadows, I listen. Because now I know the truth. The mist isn't hiding the monsters. The mist is how they find us. End of report. Jennifer Rodriguez, Olympic National Park, Ranger Special Research Division. Note: if you find this report and if you've seen the signs, the glowing marks, the perfect lines of footprints, the whispers in your head, don't try to fight it alone. Call the number below. We're building our own network because the only way to fight something that connects minds is to connect them our way.